Welcome, everyone, to a SEEC meeting, a very special meeting, I think, to have a brain trust like this to tell us of all that is happening because of some great legislation that was passed in the 117th session of Congress. So I will now call the meeting of SEEC to order. I'm Paul Tonko. I am one of the co-chairs. Doris Matsui, another co-chair, will be with us shortly. And I believe Mike Quigley has a conflict. He's our third chair out of Illinois, and he can't make it. And we have some vice chairs with us, including Shelley Pingree, Don Beyer, and Sean Caston, who are vice chairs. But today's SEEC meeting indeed is special because it's an opportunity to hear real-life application to policy and resources that have been made available. Not only are we celebrating all that has been accomplished with just 1 year of the Inflation Reduction Act being in play, but joining us are 8 companies directly responsible for investing in the clean energy economy. We're so happy to have all of our participants here today to celebrate the United States' long-sought response to climate change that is already building a more just, a more equitable, and a cleaner future for all Americans. And I cannot wait to continue to see the job creation and pollution reduction benefits that will be growing with the years ahead. We know the Inflation Reduction Act is transformational, not just because it is tackling the climate crisis, but because of how it is doing it. The historic law ensures that our clean energy future will be built by well-paid Americans using American-made technologies. And today we will have the opportunity to hear directly from several companies that are supporting our clean energy manufacturing renaissance and helping to build resilient domestic supply chains, something that became very, very much a discussion point during the COVID era. These companies span a range of technologies, including wind, solar batteries, heat pumps, and geothermal. So while they may all have different business models, they all share a similar story. The Inflation Reduction Act is enabling them to make transformational investments in our country. And in addition to clean energy technologies, we cannot forget the manufacturing sectors that will produce the steel, the cement, insulation, and other materials that will make clean energy projects and our broader infrastructure renewal possible. These industries are also in need of investment and federal support to not just decarbonize, but also compete in the global economy. In the past 12 months, private industry has announced several hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy investments, surpassing the last 8 years of clean investments combined. So it's working. The leveraging of private sector money is becoming very apparent. Honestly, we could host 10 of these roundtables and still find compelling companies that are benefiting from the IRA. And that is because the IRA's influence is powerful and indeed widespread, with more than 170,600 new jobs and 272 new projects in the clean energy sector announced across 44 states, putting us back on track to achieve ambitious and scientifically necessary climate goals by the end of the decade. So I think it's right to say that the pioneer spirit of America is alive and well. And finally, I want to add that it is not sufficient to just create jobs. They need to be good jobs, well-paying, family-sustaining, and hopefully unionized jobs. I know the IRA provides important tools to ensure that this will be the case and that American workers, including people from communities that have historically been overlooked, underserved, and at risk of being left behind, get their fair share of the benefits from our national clean energy transformation. I hope in the future we will have the opportunity to hear testimony from some of those clean energy workers that can indeed attest to that goal. So it is my effort that people leave here today as excited as I am, because our nation is on the verge of something truly great. And there are so many incredible stories to tell about the innovation and the opportunity happening in the clean energy world right now. These private sector investments are real. The jobs being created are real. And the American people and our planet have so much to gain if we continue to provide these companies with the long-term certainty of federal incentives that they need to grow their businesses. And with all that said, we must know that our work is far from done. We must build upon this moment. SEEC members are committed to continuing the fight for even more bold climate action in Congress. But today, I'm excited to welcome our guests and hear about their plans to take full advantage of the IRA. With that, let me recognize our speakers to hear more about their individual companies' efforts. And we can start with Chrissy Borksy. Welcome, Chrissy. Senior Executive Director of Government Affairs and Policy at GE Vernova. Chrissy, the mic, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
And welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the House Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, and a special thank you to Mr. Paul Tonko for inviting GE Vernova to participate today. I am Chrissy Borski, Senior Executive Director for Government Affairs and Policy for GE Vernova. It's an honor to join you. GE Vernova is part of a 130-year-old company that was founded by Thomas Edison. Throughout our history, we have pioneered technologies that have spurred world-transforming changes and improved the lives of billions. Today, we've never felt a sense of urgency to lead the energy transition. This is especially true when you consider our technologies are used to help produce nearly 30% of the world's electricity. GE Vernova is a purpose-built company. We're focused on both electrifying and decarbonizing the world. In the last year, the Inflation Reduction Act impact has been transformative for the energy industry. It has positioned America as a global leader in the energy transition. And this is in thanks to many congressional leaders who helped to work past the law. Let me say this simply and clearly. The IRA is working. It's driving action for climate change, energy security, manufacturing jobs, and American competitiveness. In the last year, the implementation of the IRA is one of GE Vernova's #1 priorities. We have submitted comments to Treasury on over 10 provisions in the IRA related to the IRA credits, and have worked with the administration, Treasury, the Department of Energy, Department of Labor, and many members of Congress on a wide variety of issues. We believe we must get this right to meet the overall goal of the IRA to advance decarbonization, to invest and revitalize U.S. manufacturing, and to create more U.S. jobs. Let me mention briefly some of the direct impact the IRA has had on GE Vernova. At GE Vernova, we have accelerated investments and innovations and breakthrough innovations. We're building new factories and creating jobs. In June, we announced that in Schenectady, New York, one of our largest and most iconic facilities, we're investing $50 million and adding 200 jobs to build our 6-megawatt wind turbine. In Pensacola, Florida, we're investing $20 million to expand our already existing leading onshore wind facility, including employing many veterans from the nearby Navy base. But what's most exciting is what's yet to come, what the IRA will do in the future. In January, we shared our interest in opening both a nacelle facility for offshore wind and a blade facility for offshore wind in the New York area. This is dependent, of course, on us securing the necessary volume. But with these two facilities, we have the potential to hire 1,000 direct and indirect jobs. And in the future, we look forward to continued momentum, not just for wind, but for advanced research in carbon capture, our nuclear energy business with small modular reactors, and in our efforts to modernize the grid. And it's not just us. Companies nationwide are making massive investments in technology, in growth, and in workers in America. As we embrace the second year of the IRA, we are looking forward to continued guidance and proposed rules so that we can fully implement the IRA. We will continue to work with the administration, U.S. Treasury, IRS, Department of Energy, Department of Labor, and many other entities that are involved, and of course, members of Congress, to ensure that swift, pragmatic guidance is issued on the IRA implementation. Pragmatic guidance will ensure that we understand what the rules are, and it'll allow companies like GE Vernova to continue those discussions on potential future investments in the U.S. On behalf of GE Vernova, I want to thank each of you for this transformative law, which is paving the way for a successful energy transition in the U.S. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chrissy. It's a great way to start off the discussion. I can say it's always a pleasure to visit the corporate headquarters and the campus of GE in my district, and to go to the R&D center and stand behind that Thomas Edison desk and feel empowered by that whole bit of history. So thank you. Next, we'll go to Mark Kuntz, Chief Executive Officer of Mitsubishi Electric Train, HVAC US. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. And thank you, distinguished members of the House Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, for holding this briefing and for inviting me to speak for the second time as regards the IRA and the fantastic impacts that it's having on the innovative heat pump marketplace. As Representative Tonko mentioned, I'm Mark Kuntz, CEO of Mitsubishi Electric Train, which is a joint venture between Train Technologies, a major US HVAC company, and Mitsubishi Electric. We directly employ over 600 people in the United States and indirectly support the employment of over 100,000 service technicians, engineers, installers, including our network of contractors to install heat pumps. And we train at over 110 physical locations around the US. Our heat pump systems have been the market leader in technological innovation, efficiency, and consumer comfort for decades. Our primary products are high-efficiency, inverter-driven heat pumps, and I'll refer to them as all-climate heat pumps. All-climate heat pumps operate effectively even in the coldest climate regions in the US, including Maine, where, as Representative Pingree would be well aware, Governor Mills announced in July that the state of Maine has surpassed their goal of 100,000 heat pump installations 2 years ahead of schedule. I'm pleased to say the vast majority of those heat pumps are from my company. All climate heat pumps operate efficiently at temperatures well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, minimizing the use of fossil fuels or electric resistance backup sources of heat. We recognize the need for robust educational efforts on the societal benefits that all climate heat pumps provide. Simply put, all climate heat pumps efficiently cool and heat buildings in any climate. Think of a heat pump as a bidirectional air conditioner capable of moving heat into or out of a building, making it warmer or cooler depending on what the end user wants. Heat pumps are now considered a critical clean technology because they're powered exclusively by electricity, which can be 100% clean and renewable. All climate heat pumps produce between 2 and 5 times the amount of heat that they consume in electricity. Given this, they can save consumers money on their energy bills, particularly from homes or buildings reliant on expensive and carbon-intensive propane or fuel oil. All climate heat pumps also play a direct role in helping the United States achieve its decarbonization goals. According to Rewiring America, if all single-family homes in the US adopted this technology, the total annual emissions reduction would be 160 million metric tons of CO2, the equivalent of removing 36 million cars from the road for a year. The IRA sought to address common barriers that have inhibited widespread adoption, particularly by low and moderate income households, and our projections signal that it will be successful. We expect that 3 programs within the IRA will have the largest impact: the home energy rebates, the 25C tax credit, and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Between 2022 and 2030, we project a total market demand of over 37.5 million heat pumps, a significant portion of which can be attributed to the direct and the indirect effects of the IRA. All of these programs will result in increased access to heat pumps, meaning increased demand, more jobs for local installers, contractors, and energy auditors, most of which are small businesses. We invest millions of dollars each year to train contractors to understand how to properly install these sophisticated systems using 110 training centers across the US. With the passage of the IRA, we are increasing the number of those training centers dramatically to train a new generation of trade workers to install and service this technology. In addition, we've pursued contractor partnerships to engage with incentives to scale quality installations, and to provide customers with greater control and connectivity and grid resilience. For example, my company and smart panel innovator SPAN recently announced a technology collaboration whereby the SPAN panel can directly control the amount of electricity that our heat pump utilizes, optimizing the effectiveness of the total energy use of the household. This type of grid enhancement and quality assurance will be critical as more households electrify and the rebates become operational across the country. In closing, the IRA's effects are just starting to be felt, as programs like the rebates and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund are just now being rolled out. But in preparation, my company is educating consumers and training a new generation of workers to be ready to meet the demand that these programs will produce. We're elated that the IRA is enabling greater access to innovative heat pump technologies for all Americans, and we know that adoption of all climate heat pumps will help decarbonize the U.S. economy and lead to strong job growth across every state. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear.
You're most welcome, Mark, and thank you for a great presentation. I know you brought a great smile to the face of Representative Pingree with that Maine success story, so thank you. Next, we'll go to Daniel Zotos, who is Senior Manager of Public Affairs and Advocacy at Redwood Materials. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Chairman Tonko and the distinguished members of SEEC for convening this forum today, and thank you for your relentless dedication to sustainable energy and environmental policies. My name is Daniel Zotos. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Affairs and Advocacy at Redwood Materials. Redwood is committed to ensuring the United States can meet its clean energy and electric vehicle ambitions by developing a domestic, secure, and sustainable battery supply chain. Our strategy to support this mission includes collecting and recycling end-of-life lithium-ion batteries, processing and refining the critical minerals they contain, and then remanufacturing them into sustainable battery materials, specifically cathode active materials and anode foils to directly supply battery cell manufacturing here in the United States. Currently, Redwood receives more than 10 gigawatt hours of end-of-life batteries, but we're quickly expanding production across our operations to achieve 100 gigawatt hours per year, which is enough to power 1 million EVs. Earlier this year, we began production of anode copper foil. This was an industry first in North America. We also announced conditional commitment on a $2 billion loan from the Department of Energy to scale domestic component production from as much recycled content as possible. The Achilles heel of America's electric vehicle and clean energy ambitions has been an over-reliance on Asia for critical high-value battery components. Without domestic production, U.S. battery cell manufacturers risk offshoring over $600 billion in economic value for both anode and cathode components over the next decade. However, thanks to the Clean Vehicle and Advanced Manufacturing Production Tax Credit provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, this paradigm has already begun to shift. Companies like Redwood are doubling down on their investments in America, onshoring key aspects of the battery value chain, building the technical expertise necessary, and creating high-paying jobs. These efforts are giving clean energy technology and EV adoption its greatest chance of success here in the United States. Redwood's Nevada site houses recycling, refining, remanufacturing, and we're scaling up as we speak. Meanwhile, we're poised to break ground later this year on our second campus, right outside of Charleston, South Carolina. This will be a $3.5 billion investment for all of these things I've mentioned. With North America on track to establish approximately 1,600 gigawatt hours of battery cell production in the next decade, these investments are critical to keeping the U.S. the forefront of manufacturing and job creation, meeting our clean energy and sustainability goals, and ensuring we strengthen our supply chain and lessen our reliance on foreign battery components. I'd like to close by commending Congress, especially the leaders on this coalition, for their ongoing collaboration with industry stakeholders and their commitment to a truly domestic and sustainable advanced battery manufacturing industry here in the United States. The promise of the IRA is a testament to the power of public policy and private enterprise collaborating effectively to restore American manufacturing leadership while investing in energy independence. With the IRA's support, we are onshoring key aspects of this battery value chain. We are directly addressing the climate crisis in doing so, and we're retaining immense economic value here in the United States. Thank you for your continued support.
Thank you, Dan, and it's great to hear that stat on the tens of millions of cars that you will power with your work. So the IRA is working. Next, we'll move to Gabriel Malik, Chief of Staff for FERVO. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you, Chairman Tonko. Thank you to SEEC for including FERVO in today's discussion. My name is Gabriel Malik. I'm Chief of Staff at FERVO Energy. We're a next-generation geothermal power developer, leveraging proven oil and gas technology to produce 24/7 clean, firm power. I want to start with a bit of an overview on geothermal, since I know it's new to many folks in the room, and then talk more concretely about how the IRA has supercharged our business. So many of you might think of geysers of Iceland when you hear the word geothermal, and that's geothermal in its oldest, most traditional form. To make geothermal power production work, you need three factors: fluid, heat, and permeable rock, so rock with fractures in it. And in places like Iceland, you can access geothermal, hydrothermal resources close to the surface. Other countries don't have that same luxury, and over time, the geothermal industry evolved to identify resources that maybe don't have all three of those factors, but at least have two: heat and permeability. And so we've seen traditional geothermal developers find hot rock that has natural fractures and inject water underground, heating that water, bringing it back to surface, and using that steam to turn a turbine and generate electricity. There are two problems with that traditional approach. First, there are only so many locations that have both high heat and natural permeability. So you're dealing with a geographically constrained resource. And second, even when you can find those ideal locations with high heat and high permeability, those natural fracture systems are notoriously hard to model, and they're hard to control. And so what we've seen in traditional geothermal development is injecting water underground, expecting that water to flow in a certain direction, only come to find out the water dissipates across the rock formation and can't come back to surface. And that's why we've seen geothermal only account for a small percentage of power generation in the US. What we're doing at FERVO is engineering those fracture networks through hydraulic fracturing and allowing ourselves to just look for hot rock. The nice thing about that approach is that there's hot rock everywhere. This massively expands the resource potential of geothermal. With existing drilling technology today, we can produce over 300 gigawatts of energy just here in the US. It also addresses that second problem I mentioned on reliability. Because we are creating these fracture networks, we understand how they propagate, and so when we inject water underground, we can drill our second well to intersect those fractures precisely and bring that water back to surface. That's geothermal in a nutshell. That last point is enhanced geothermal that FERVO is pioneering. And just earlier this summer, we completed our first commercial pilot project in northern Nevada with Google as a development partner, and proved definitively that these drilling technologies can and in fact do work in the geothermal industry. We've since moved on, and we're in rapid scale-up mode. We've just begun drilling a 400 megawatt project in southwest Utah, which we plan to bring online first phase in 2026, second phase in 2028. And we wouldn't be able to scale up as quickly at such a scale were it not for the IRA. Before the IRA passed, geothermal did have access to the investment tax credit and the production tax credit, but those credits lapsed on an annual basis for geothermal. It's incredibly hard to have a conversation with the project finance community when you don't know whether you have access to tax credits the next year or the year after that. And with the IRA, we now have guaranteed access to both the investment tax credit and the production tax credit for the next 10 years it allows Fervo to finance incredibly capital-intensive projects and deliver 24/7 clean, firm power across the country. And I'll end by pointing out the indirect benefits of the IRA on geothermal. As my colleagues have touched on, as we've seen in the news, the IRA is leading to a boom in solar and wind development across the country. And as you increase the amount of intermittent renewable resources, solar and wind, on the grid, you face reliability concerns if you don't at the same time bring on 24/7 clean, firm resources like geothermal. We've seen these challenges in California already, which has increased solar penetration and is now regulating utilities to procure clean, firm resources, and we'll continue to see that take place as solar and wind increase through the IRA. And so it's incredibly important that as we see this boom in clean energy through the Inflation Reduction Act on solar and wind, we now have geothermal coming up right alongside it with reliable, available tax credits to provide 24/7 clean power. I want to thank you all again for your leadership and excited to see where we continue to drive things.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you for the quick course on geothermal and obviously how the IRA is helping. Next, we have James Richot. Did I say that correctly? Richot. Sorry. James Richot, Federal Policy Director at Nexamp, and welcome, Jim.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Congressman Tanco, for the invitation to participate in today's conference, or today's event, and for your long-standing leadership on climate and energy issues. It is greatly appreciated. And I also want to thank other members of the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, congressional staff, friends and partners who are joining today's discussion. I greatly appreciate your time today as well. So I wanted to provide a little bit of background on Nexamp and who we are, what we do, and then touch on the role of the Inflation Reduction Act. So the company was founded in 2007 by two U.S. Army veterans. They returned from active duty overseas and really wanted to focus on reducing the nation's reliance on fossil fuels. So it literally started as a two-person operation focused on clean energy projects, including rooftop solar, energy efficiency upgrades. There was a smattering of geothermal in there as well. And it has evolved quite a bit since. We now have over 450 employees across the country. We're serving over 60,000 customers, and we have just over a gigawatt of generating capacity in service, with several more gigawatts in various stages of development. We're headquartered in Boston, so the Northeast is a very active market for us, so a large number of projects in Massachusetts, Maine, New York is one of our largest markets, as well as projects in the Mid-Atlantic in Maryland and Virginia. Growing market in the Midwest, Illinois, another one of our largest markets. And we're very excited about some of the state policy developments in that region as well that support community solar. And then growing market out west in New Mexico, California, and Hawaii. So community solar is our bread and butter. So these are projects that are kind of in the 4 to 5 megawatt ballpark, some a little bit larger, some a little bit smaller, and often paired with storage. We are a vertically integrated community solar company, so we're involved from the very start of a project, working with landowners, often small family farms, through the construction, management of the facility itself, and then we're directly engaging with customers. And that involvement from start to operations gives us a really unique perspective around the opportunities associated with distributed generation. Our facilities allow individual consumers to participate in the clean energy economy in ways they might not otherwise have been able to, right? A lot of folks are not able, they're renters or they can't afford rooftop solar, so subscribing into a community solar program allows them to participate in that and receive anywhere from 10 to 20% savings on their annual energy bill. We're especially focused on prioritizing clean energy access to low-income customers and communities. Very, very heavy emphasis for us as a company. And it's already been stated, but it bears repeating, and the Inflation Reduction Act is nothing short of transformational. It provides industry with the long-term certainty we've been asking for a long time, but it's also driving investments in communities across the country. Again, low-income communities, energy communities as well. And so throughout the solar industry, we've seen significant investment announcements since passage of the IRA. It was almost instantaneous. And I'll highlight a couple from Nexamp, recent announcements in May involving $400 million in financing for almost 50 new community solar projects, primarily in rural communities across 6 states. And most recently, we announced a strategic partnership with Helene. They're a North American solar module manufacturer headquartered in Mountain Iron, Minnesota. That partnership represents the largest community solar module order in U.S. history. It's a 1.5 gigawatt solar module purchase over the next 5 years, and that would not have been possible without the Inflation Reduction Act. Right? And so what we've seen over the last year, what we continue to see, is significant momentum in the U.S. solar industry. We now have policies in place for companies to make bold and ambitious investments, and it's up to companies such as Nexamp to now take up that challenge. We're very excited to do so and to be a central part of this energy transformation here in the U.S. So again, thank you very much for the time and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Jim, and we thank your veterans founders. Obviously, so many from our veterans community understand the importance of a clean energy agenda, so thank them for us. Next, we'll move to Derek Phelps, Head of Policy and Government Affairs at 12, and welcome, Derek.
Thank you, Representative Tonko and other distinguished members of the caucus. Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's meeting. My name is Derek Phelps, and I am Head of Policy and Government Affairs at 12. Most things in the world are made from oil, otherwise known as fossil fuels. Products ranging from running shoes to office furniture and even car parts typically require petrochemicals that are made from fossil fuels. At 12, we seek to change all that by taking a different approach, one in which we view carbon as part of the solution. 12, which takes its name after the atomic weight of carbon, is a carbon transformation company. We were founded in 2015 by 2 postdoctoral researchers at Stanford University, who then partnered with fellow Stanford graduate and clean tech entrepreneur Nicholas Flanders. Our proprietary technology enables us to transform CO2 with water and renewable electricity into thousands of products ranging from apparel to transportation fuels. Hence our trademark for our products is CO2 made. We refer to our transformation process as industrial photosynthesis, given that it works much like a tree, which takes sunlight, water, and CO2 as inputs and produces oxygen. Indeed, apart from the actual products that we make, our only other output is oxygen. We've already actively partnered with the world's biggest brands, such as Procter & Gamble and Mercedes-Benz, to eliminate emissions from their products and supply chains. However, since last year's passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we're currently all in on our sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF product, which we refer to as E-Jet. Our E-Jet product has been tested by the U.S. Air Force and is ASTM certified, and it has an overall lower carbon footprint of up to 90% as compared to conventional jet fuel. We're all in on SAF because of the clear, compelling, bold, unambiguous, and enormously impactful policy support provided through the Inflation Reduction Act. Frankly, that support, with a powerful mix of incentives and grants, has provided much-needed confidence to investors and offtake customers, and has even triggered action by several states to follow suit with incentives of their own. Washington State, for example, passed a SAF incentive bill earlier this year, and based in no small part on that action, this past summer, 12 broke ground on our first E-Jet manufacturing facility in Washington State, where we were immensely proud to have in attendance Governor Jay Inslee, who in 2009 was one of the 2 founding co-chairs of the Sustainable Energy and Environment Caucus. 12 understands that it will take everyone to address the scale of the climate crisis. That's why we're so appreciative of the leadership and forward thinking embodied in the IRA, which ushers in a once-in-a-generation investment towards meeting that challenge with policies to drive climate innovation across every sector of our economy, bolster domestic energy production, and champion clean energy. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Derek, and we appreciate the innovation that you're bringing to the forefront. Next, we're going to hear from Tom Jensen, Senior Manager at Holcomb, who is a replacement, I believe, for Melissa Carey, who couldn't join us from the company, but it's...
She's much more polished.
No, not to imply that at all, but we appreciate you doing this on last-minute assignment. Tom Jensen, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me start with since we haven't heard the confessions today. Chairman, this is a bit of a confession. I'm scheduled to be somewhere else this afternoon, but I'm here. What we're hearing from a variety of stakeholders is really cool stuff, really important stuff. And I tell you something, from a cement manufacturer perspective, and I was glad to hear Congressman Tonko mention it in his opening remarks. It's not lost on us, not lost at all. And Holcim's a big company, and what we do in manufacturing cement in the industry is pretty much, a lot of shoulder pads cracking and old school stuff. But it's also awfully important. Look at your congressional districts. Look at when I walked over here today from the Senate side of the Hill. The cement industry, the contributions to the economic development into our country are just, fundamental, and yet we don't appreciate them, frankly. So, Holcim, 43 states, 350 facilities, 7,000 employees, that's all really important. But what we're really talking about is an old operational model and process that we're trying to make better, cleaner, and greener, and we're leading the industry in this regard. The Inflation Reduction Act, and to a smaller extent, building bipartisan infrastructure law, are critical in this regard. So we sit here 1 year later, and we were big proponents of the bill as it moved through the Congress, and we appreciate all the members of Congress who are following up on the bill. Not just it's great to pass it, has the press release back home and shake a few hands, but are following up. And we appreciate the staffers that were here to get smart on this issue. 4 things that we see Holcim sees as we go through this process today, and more importantly, in the future. Incentives are key. It was mentioned by several of my colleagues. That gives certainties. Businesses like certainties. We all know it, but it's fact. That's critical. The IRA tax incentives are key. Number 2, low carbon transportation materials grants, these programs where customer demand will help drive the industry. Right? We firmly believe that the carrot is better than the stick. And the company is going to move in this direction for several reasons. Number 1, it's the right thing to do. Number 2, their customers are demanding this kind of action. Number 3, share owners may be saying, hey, you got to get cleaner and greener, right? And number 4, employees, all important movers or levers with the company. So grants for customers that can take advantage of, which are in the bill, or the law, I should say, are important to us. In addition, what's also driving the demand for these products are things within the Department of Energy and their Office of Clean Demonstrations. The Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations at DOE is the same idea. Don't think about not what is, but what could be. So today, when you make cement, 70% of your problem comes from one key component of the cement. 70% of your emissions and your green problem comes from clinker. How do we do that better? Well, these pilot projects and demonstration projects at DOE are what are going to move industry forward. And that's just not good policy, that's good politics, and it's good business. So we appreciate that in the bill, and we're further pushing in that regard to decrease and make net zero a cement manufacturing operation, which is a really, really difficult and challenging, goal. And lastly, we think that Buy Clean is key as we expand the market for lower carbon products again. So our organization, again, moved by customers, by shareowner groups, by employees, by a burning desire to do the right thing. And the companies that don't get behind these are going to lose. It might not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but we'll have this conversation again and reconvene the group in a couple years, and you'll see they're going to lose. So the fact that members of Congress are interested in, as the bill matures, the law matures, and other aspects of it are unveiled, and that folks on the Hill here are still looking at this and working together, we appreciate what SEEC is doing. Thank you for your time. We know you got a lot of demands on your time, and to come out and spend it talking to us about these things has been for me, it's been a better deal than I had for this hour when I woke up this morning. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for highlighting the certainty associated with the legislation, as others on the panel have done. So thank you. And we conclude with Rahul Iyer. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
Principal at KCK Group on behalf of the American Battery Solutions. Welcome, Rahul.
Very good. Thank you so very much for the time, and Chairman Tonko for that introduction, and thanks all to the rest of the coalition as well. So my name is Rahul Iyer, and I help run an investment fund called KCK Group, focused on industrials and emerging technology. And we're significantly invested across the entire value chain, including advanced power generation, electric motors, energy storage, and battery manufacturing. Now, prior to investing, I spent 20 plus years building several energy technology-related companies in hydrogen production, fuel cells, advanced biofuels, natural gas, lower carbon chemicals, et cetera. And I share that because I can firmly say that during that period of time and now, the IRA is the most comprehensive, America First industrial policy this country has had in more than a generation. And it's tempting to cast the IRA as an economic incentive or a climate bill or something of the sort. I think really understanding what this is and the real impact to the United States, its workers, its citizens, and consumers is really mission critical in making sure that this thing is a success. Now, in 2018, KCK Group co-founded a company with battery industry veteran Subhash Dar called American Battery Solutions, ABS. ABS is headquartered in Lake Orion, Michigan, with manufacturing in Springboro, Ohio. And today, ABS is about 200 people strong, designing and manufacturing lithium-ion battery packs for industrial and commercial vehicles, like buses, delivery trucks, agricultural equipment, and even trains and boats. ABS's customers are vehicle companies that historically purchase their diesel or gasoline engines from suppliers around the world to integrate into their vehicles. Now, these customers are transitioning to electric and hybrid drivetrains, which require the highest quality industrial-grade battery systems they can get their hands on. So from cell chemistry selection through pack design, through high-volume manufacturing, ABS's 200-plus employees enable these companies to accelerate their transition as their customers demand the lower operating costs and the lower emissions associated with electrification. As of today, ABS has 2 gigawatt hours of pack manufacturing capacity installed in Ohio, with plans to grow to 8 gigawatt hours over the course of the next couple of years, creating an additional 400 permanent design and manufacturing jobs in the process. To help finance that growth plan, we've been working very closely with the DOE's Loan Program Office, which thankfully under the IRA has been expanded in some very, very important ways. And we can get into those details another time. Now, ABS recently announced a spin-off called American Energy Storage Innovations, or AESI, based in Hudson, Massachusetts. AESI provides utility-grade, modularized 7.2 megawatt-hour stationary energy storage systems. These systems are absolutely mission-critical as we race to modernize America's power grids. America's power grids are in desperate need for additional resiliency, safety, the ability to make ultra-low-cost renewable energy dispatchable, and to ultimately provide the storage to support large-scale adoption of electrification of vehicles. Now, the race to electrify transportation and implement energy storage more broadly is global, and it's not new by any stretch of the imagination. It didn't start last year. The race today is driven by simple economics. It's promoted by national security interests, and it's required in order to achieve global emissions reductions. Unfortunately, much of the world is on its second lap, while we in the United States are still warming up and some folks still getting their shoes laced up. However, thanks to industrial policies contained within the IRA, American companies, American workers, and American consumers have an opportunity to not only compete, but to win in this race. Win the valuable business, win the well-paying jobs, win stable and much lower energy costs. And ultimately, if all of that upside isn't enough for all of us, the world has no choice in the matter, because the costs of losing against the climate crisis are far too profound to even measure. So, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak for a few minutes. And again, thank you very, very much for your leadership on the IRA. And I hope that over the course of the next 10 years of implementing this law, that we're able to reap the benefits that all of us have been talking about today.
Thank you, Rahul. Most appreciated, and thank you for citing the win-win-win scenario for industry, consumers, planet, and everyone. So great presentations, and we thank you for that. You can just feel the energy that's behind this legislation and the transformational opportunities that you all cited. We're now going to hear from my colleagues from SEEC. We'll start with, again, one of our vice chairs, Shelley Pingree, representative from Maine. And Shelley?
Thank you. Thanks, Paul, for moderating this. And really, thank you all. I know you're all busy, and we want you to spend this money as fast as possible and apply for grants as fast as possible. So sorry to take up your time, but it's really is very beneficial for us to be able to talk about how this funding is being implemented and what's working in the system. And so, and thank you for the shout out to Maine's heat pump program. We really were excited that we met our goal. We're one of those states that's been very dependent on fossil fuels, particularly heating oil. So converting has been hugely important to us. I personally live in a house with heat pumps and have been through some very cold winters, and also power those heat pumps with solar panels. So have the best of both worlds, and am a just a evangelist about this stuff. Like, we really need to get people moving faster in this direction. But you mentioned this issue about all-season heat pumps, and I think the way you talk about it is to help people understand that. And I feel a little bit of what we confront here is the reality, but then this mythology that's built up. And some of it, I think, just comes from the misinformation campaigns about the opposition to converting from fossil fuels. People say, oh, I can't buy an electric car because there aren't enough charging stations. I can't get a heat pump. I can't, I can't do anything with the battery because they're all manufactured in some other country. So I think that is often as important of a project going on right now is how we make sure people are hearing accurate information, just as you're all telling us today. So tell me what you've had to go through to convince people that heat pumps work for everybody and that they're perfectly good in cold weather, and how are you countering that kind of opposition?
I love that term, mythology. There is a mythology. It's historic reality, but no longer the case that heat pumps are not capable in cold climates. I actually was asked that question by Secretary Granholm and had the opportunity to answer her with regard to a project we'd done in the upper peninsula of Michigan, 60 low-income houses that had relied on electric resistance heat. And we added heat pumps to every one of those houses. It was centrally billed so they could track the energy usage. The end users had never been happier because they had clean, circulating air and plus a bonus air conditioning in the summer. The property manager quoted the fact that the polar vortex had come through upper peninsula and they had had temperatures at negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit and had no problems. In fact, none of the resistance heat ever even came on. And they've saved on average $30,000 a year, which is about 35% of their total utility bill. We've written that up as a case study because that proves the case. I asked Secretary, could you confirm that Ontonagon is actually a very cold climate? She said, well, first, it's pronounced Ontonagon. And yes, it's got to be about one of the coldest places in the country. If they work there, I'm convinced that they will work anywhere. And so we are amplifying that message. The state of Maine is as good of a case. 100,000 heat pumps would not be operating in Maine if they didn't work. And we support everything that you're doing. And the governor has just set a new goal for the next generation of heat pumps, and we will be very active in supporting that.
I just want to reinforce the point you made. In Maine, we've always been very proud to say, oh, we're one of those states that doesn't use air conditioning, because we never thought we needed it, because we didn't used to need it, and because it's an added expense and we like to pretend we're very tough. And the fact is now, if you have a heat pump, as you mentioned, I think people don't always understand, you automatically have an air conditioning system. And given the unprecedented heat that we've had, it really makes a huge difference in a lot of people's houses, and it will increasingly. And you don't buy two systems, you just have that one thing. So I just want to reinforce what you said.
I thank you for mentioning that, and I'll just throw out one other piece. We designed these for the maximum efficiency in winter. This is all about the decarbonization of heat, but because of that, they're extremely high efficient air conditioners. The standard for a US air conditioner is 14 SEER. These products are 30 SEER, so twice as efficient as a conventional air conditioner. So even though you're adding that benefit, you're doing it at a very minor amount of energy usage in the summer. So it's a win-win.
Really. well, I could ask you all questions, but I'll give my other colleagues a turn and maybe get another chance.
Representative Don Beyer, another co-chair, or SEEC, from the Commonwealth of Virginia. So the mic is yours.
Microphone too. So let me just pose three quick questions. First, for Chrissy, the SMRs, we've been hearing about SMRs for a long, long time. I'd love to know when we're actually going to start installing them, rather than just talking about it. And for Mark, do heat pumps do away with the need for CFCs? Does that now become not a concern that we have to do as we move forward? And finally, for Derek, Tom at a Holson, rather, on carbon, we're a lot involved in direct air capture. In the announcement last week, there are 3 big direct air capture plants going up around the country. Has concrete cement been a meaningful place to store carbon, and how much of the storage can you account for?
Sure.
And that's all I have. Should I go first, or?
Well, let's go back to Chrissy, I believe, because we'll go in the sequence that it was asked.
Congressman, thank you so much for the question. I personally think it's an exciting technology, and it has been going on. We've been working on our small modular reactor for probably several years now. I'll tell you that probably the leader right now in the deployment of an SMR is Canada. Ontario Power Generation issued an RFP. GE was selected as the design they will use our reactor. They've increased it to now, I believe it's 2 additional reactors that'll probably become operational in 2030. But there is growing interest in the U.S. We announced last year a partnership with the Tennessee Valley Authority, so TVA is looking at it, but there's other utilities that have become more interested, and primarily because of the tech neutral provision in the IRA. That will allow SMRs to qualify for that tax credit as well. There are other countries who are also in the rush to deploy SMRs. UK and Poland are also at the forefront. So those are, U.S. is in the fight, but we've got to do more. And I think with the IRA, it'll give us that opportunity to really start deploying that technology.
Thank you. We'll move to Mark.
Yeah, with regards to refrigerants, heat pumps definitely operate using a refrigerant cycle, and the current refrigerant has a global warming potential that's quite high, over 2,000. Our industry is in transition under the AIM Act being moderated by the EPA. At the end of 2024, all of our industry will be switching to a low GWP refrigerant that will be less than 700 global warming potential. So we're on that pathway. The transition is already underway. That will eliminate CFCs and HFCs and will put us on a path for continuing improvements in that area. But a big step happens at the end of 2024. The earlier heat pumps will continue using the current refrigerant, but there's a phase out of that refrigerant between now and 2030. So the incumbent equipment will continue to operate, and as it slowly dwindles, the new refrigerants will take its place.
And Derek, please.
Sure, thank you. So I think your question,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Did you have a question for Derek and Tom, right?
Yeah, so the answer, Congressman Beyer, is that currently carbon capture is being beta tested in Europe. In the United States, we have 2 projects working very closely, with DOE on those. And frankly, that was the stimulus for this, the DOE work. That would capture 95% of the CO2 once they're up and running. So those are underway, but up till now, that wasn't, in the plans, frankly. So one of the other reasons why IRA has stimulated this kind of a corporate, action, if you will.
45Q gives us $180 a metric ton pay, which is wonderful. This is why you get climate workers and carbon engineering. I was concerned more about maybe just a apocryphal story that you could use a lot more carbon in the manufacture of concrete cement as a place to store it, or the development resting place for carbon, rather than a salt dome or cracks in the subsurface.
Right, and I think that's, kind of where the puck is going. Can we utilize that material to store carbon? But I can't give you any kind of a crystal ball on where we are right now on that, frankly. But thank you. Understood.
And Derek, did you have a comment that you were sharing with
I
us?
thought I heard my name, but, so,
I thought I did too.
I'm not trying to get in anybody's way. Ed, I think I heard a question about whether we're active in the DAC space and whether, CO2 derived from cement resources might be in our envelope. The short answer is, we are really focused on biogenic CO2 right now, so that really means ethanol manufacturers, pulp and paper, and CO2 derived from manufacturing facilities in the cement space are certainly in that envelope. As to DAC, direct air capture, that's kind of on the other side of the horizon for us. We need to tackle the cost curve on that, but we definitely see a world where, direct air capture is really a place where we start to get access to enormous amounts of carbon as we go to scale and make products other than just jet fuel.
More.
Are you the first company in history to name yourself after an atomic number? I'm sorry, did I get that? Are you the first company in history to name yourself after an atomic number?
Well, no. There's another out there. We're not the first, but probably the clean tech space.
Okay. Next, we'll move to Representative Sainsbury for a question. Or was Sean ahead of you? He was. I'm sorry. Another co-chair? Yes, yeah. No, we know there's another half of the room here. We'll go to two co-chairs over here. Sean Casson from Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here and all that you do. And Mr. Jensen, I really appreciate your comment about the carrots versus sticks. There was a lot of intentionality in the IRA about biasing in favor of carrots, and as a general policy formulation, sticks create a whole ecology of losers. Carrots create a whole ecology of winners. It's selfishly more fun to hang out with winners like you all. I think it also makes it more politically durable. What I'm hoping that any or all of you could answer either today or as we go forward is to make this durable. We need to be able to quantify what we've done. And because we've done this through tax credits, in theory, it's easy, right? You give a 10% investment tax credit on capital, that means there's a 10-to-1 ratio of private capital to public capital that went in. In practice, it's almost impossible because sometimes the tax credits are on capital, sometimes they're on operating cost and a production tax credit. There's different ways to monetize tax equity, how efficiently that goes through. And what I'm wondering, if any of you have enough experience now to speak to, is how many dollars of investment have your companies put in the ground in response to the IRA? You don't have to disclose confidential stuff, but as a multiple of the tax credits you're expecting to get, what is the kind of multiplier when we talk about $380 billion of tax credits in the IRA? You guys are the practitioners. What's the multiplier we're actually seeing right now or can expect to see going forward? Any of you who feel comfortable answering that?
I'd love to speak to that as helping run an investment fund. You're right, that math is extraordinarily difficult to do. And I would say that, at the onset of the IRA becoming the law of the land, so to speak, the initial rush of investments into both capital assets for manufacturing and R&D for the long term was and continues to be significant. I would say that the multiple on that is essentially infinity because none of the IRA dollars are really going directly into the companies that are being invested in there. Very, very difficult to capture that. However, I think it's safe to say that given that in the meantime, we've seen somewhere around $1.5 billion go into minerals, somewhere around $500 billion go into EVs and batteries. Very little of that IRA money has actually gone into any of those companies just yet. Some certainly has, but of the totality, very little. And in fact, when it comes to the manufacturing tax credits, the 45X credits associated with either pack manufacturing at $10 a kilowatt hour, or upstream of that, the cell manufacturing, very little of that has been employed. So really, it's those tax credits existing that have brought the capital to work. Now, Once those facilities are up and running and growing in scale, it will be much easier to measure the direct impact of those things. But if those tax credits go away, you can very quickly guarantee that the amount of pent-up capital around the world that has been pouring into the United States into these kinds of industrial projects would shut off extremely quickly. It's one of these difficult calculations that I think for the first year or two will be very, very difficult to make and support. But by year 3, I think you'll be able to have some very, very impressive and well-documented numbers.
Couldn't agree more on that. Something, somewhat indirectly answering that, I think is a barometer for the future here as well. When we think about battery manufacturing overall, currently China operates 125 battery gigafactories. That's over 10 times what North America and Europe have combined. Of course, you look at companies like Redwood Materials, we have a $3.5 billion investment in South Carolina. We have over 1,600 gigawatt hours of cell production announced across North America because of laws like the IRA. So while it's still in the first innings here, we wouldn't be seeing this degree of investment. And I mean, when you just look at the differential between China and the USA right now, there's a lot of catch up to be done. So couldn't agree more. Quantifying all this in this moment is hard, but particularly 45X, the production tax credit, that's a game changer, without a doubt.
Congressman, I want to agree. Oh, thank you. I want to agree with Rahul. Agree completely that it'll be much easier to quantify because of the advanced manufacturing production tax credits, 45X. I would add that the other one is the investment tax credit, 48C. With the expansion of 48C, I know that it's my understanding that of the $10 billion that's allocated in the first phase, that there were approximately 42 billion of applicants that submitted that first concept paper on July 31st. So I think that with those 2 tax credits that are going to go directly to manufacturing, I think we will be able to quantify that better. And so I would ask that we come back to you, because I know from our perspective, our nacelle facility in Florida, our Blade facility in North Dakota, those tax credits went into effect January 1, 2023. So we'll come back to you. We'd be happy to provide you with that information.
I thank you all, and please, the more you can quantify, because we've all got experience in the trenches of life is terrible when every year you're asking for tax extenders. It's not what we want to do with our time. It's not what you want to do with your time. But, help us by what is that multiple so that we can make the strongest case, not just for extending this program 10 years from now, but saying, let's double down on it sooner, right? Let's make it, but we need the numbers from you all to do that. So any help you can give us on a very quantitative basis would be helpful. Thank you.
And next we move to Representative Matt Cartwright from Pennsylvania, who has been a very active, involved member with SEEC in many dimensions. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on a question that Don Beyer asked about building products. And Tom Jensen, I think this is for you. You're talking about concrete. And we have these community project funding requests that we're able to do now. And I started something called a hemp research engine in my district. I like hemp because when we talk about storing carbon, pound for pound, you store multiples of the amount of carbon that other ways store carbon. Just quickly, Tom, have you gotten involved with storing carbon in hemp and throwing it into concrete and using it for building products yet, or do you have plans for it?
So I'd answer that, Congressman, not yet, but we have looked at a variety of different compositions and compounds and chemical, scenarios to store carbon, to your point, but not in hemp specifically.
Okay, all right. And then the other follow-up I had was, Derek, you touched on sustainable aviation fuel, and Chrissy Borski, this is also for you. I'm not sure that your outfit deals specifically with the aviation. GE probably has that in a different column, but you know about it, so feel free to jump in. What are the latest and greatest technologies? How are we going to do it? How are we going to do sustainable aviation fuel?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. It's really about density of energy. You know, it's difficult to get a heavy commercial aircraft off the ground and through the sky with almost anything other than a liquefied fuel, which is what brings the focus to sustainable aviation fuel. We're excited about tackling that very difficult to decarbonize sector. Our sustainable aviation fuel, as I mentioned, has something like a 90% reduction in its carbon footprint. We're working hard to do this quickly. By the time we get to the end of this decade, we plan to be making upwards of about 1 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel. But, you know, if you look closely at this industry and consider the technologies that are alternatives, you keep coming back to sustainable aviation fuel because they need a drop-in solution. And what's really exciting about SAF is that once it's blended, it is a drop-in solution to the infrastructure, the aircraft, the jet engines that are there today.
So, not to give you the third degree, but when you say our sustainable aviation fuel, what is it?
Our product?
Yeah.
It's a product made where we take carbon dioxide, break that apart to make carbon monoxide and make a syngas, put that through Fischer-Tropsch, and out comes a sustainable aviation fuel where the hydrocarbon is, the carbon is derived from the waste CO2 that we put into it. What makes it 90%, what gives it that LCA, that lower 90% carbon intensity, you know, quality, is the process where, you know, we're using renewable energy to push that chemistry and make that chemistry. I hope that's responsive to your question.
It is, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Borski, do you want to weigh in?
Congressman, so you are correct. I'm part of the energy business. I am not part of the aerospace business that is very involved with this. I will tell you that what I have seen is a clear acceleration from our aerospace business around sustainable energy fuels and an interest and increased partnerships. What I will commit to you is we have experts, we have both here in DC and around the US, and I will ask them to come in and share with you some of those partnerships that they've built and some of the technologies they're looking at.
Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, Representative Cartwright. And a couple of you mentioned workforce needs and workforce development. Gabriel, what are your thoughts on planning to translate those oil and gas utility skills over to geothermal?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. One of the best aspects of geothermal in the energy transition is the natural, just transition that comes with scaling next-generation geothermal technology. Some of Fervo's investors are legacy oil field services companies like Helmerich & Payne, which provides our drilling rig, Liberty Energy, which runs the frac crews on our site, and we are literally taking crews of rig hands from eastern Utah in the Uinta Basin, driving them west to our site outside of Milford, Utah, and putting them right to work the very same day with no retraining, no reskilling, because we're using the exact same proven technologies that oil and gas has pioneered for decades. And so you have this really natural synergy between legacy and new that can support the workforce development that the IRA so clearly addresses.
And Jim, the same thing with like your community solar efforts? What are your thoughts on the workforce development in terms of the skill sets that you require and how you bring those over to an effort like community solar?
Well, certainly the skill sets are very transferable. The head of our EPC team is very focused on that point. A lot of the work that's happening at our facilities can easily translate with the kind of traditional workforce in the fossil industries. I will say one of the challenges we face is that because our projects are in often very rural communities, it's just workforce access in that area. So we're very focused internally on ensuring that as we bring on contractors and bring on employees, we're doing some internal workforce training and development, but also working to ensure, whether it's through federal policy or state policy, that there are programs in place that can help develop the workforce that's required for our projects.
Okay. I'm informed that votes are soon coming, but Chrissy, I'm always amazed when I go to the R&D Center for all three divisions of the company. But in regard to energy, the efforts on transformers, the efforts on buried cable and superconductive cable and battery development, any relation of the IRA and research that we could talk about here today?
Well, I'll tell you that while it wasn't initially at the forefront of our thinking on IRA, the 48 Cap C that I mentioned, the investment tax credit for manufacturing, is becoming more a priority because some of the suppliers that we are dealing with and some of the partners we are dealing with around the superconducting generator, around future grid modernization, can all access that. So as you know, the investment tax credit for transmission was not included, but these other opportunities like 48 Cap C potentially could help in the grid space and in other spaces like with the superconducting generator and with some of our sub-suppliers. I think, we are now in conversations with many of the indirect suppliers that supply to GE and talking to them about the opportunities IRA, not the direct benefits like 45X, but those other benefits or those other credits where they could benefit like 48 Cap C.
So it has a way of rippling into
It
the universe.
Absolutely does.
Any other questions from my colleagues? If not, I would ask if, and this would be across the board, and you're certainly all welcome to answer, what next? What do we do following the IRA? Obviously, a lot of benefits that we've heard about today that will be transformational. What would you encourage us to look at next? Any of you, please.
I would appreciate a focus not just on considering ways to make the IRA more durable and more permanent and all these other very important things. I would encourage all of us as stakeholders and everyone else in the room to start engaging folks that are not already IRA boosters, that are not already singing to the choir. These are folks that most likely don't understand the bill and its contents and its implications. And I think by casting a much wider network of supporters, we'll be able to get a lot more done. From my perspective, the IRA is a comprehensive basis from which we can grow. I think gaining public support through education outreach of all of these successes is actually maybe the most important thing to do right now.
Great. Anyone? Gabriel.
Yes, thanks. I would just add maybe four high-level points of consideration and preface that all of these legislative recommendations are because the IRA has been so successful. We wouldn't be experiencing growing pains if there weren't growth taking place. So the first I would just touch on is the need for federal incentives on 24/7 carbon-free energy. It gets back to a point I addressed earlier that as you scale wind and solar, you face increasing reliability concerns unless you have those 24/7 clean, firm resources available, and having direct incentives from the government on that would be incredibly additive. The second and third points are felt by geothermal, but I know are shared among a variety of renewable developers, and that would be accelerating permitting on federal land for clean energy development. About 70% of geothermal viable land today is on federal lands, and so it really does affect our industry acutely. The third point on accelerating interconnection queues, we as a utility scale developer have to wait in lengthy interconnection queues to get our power from rural parts of the country to demand centers, often on the coasts, and we currently wait about 7 years in line to bring projects to their end use. And then finally, I would just touch on additional federal funding for geothermal specifically on commercialization and deployment. I think we've seen such dramatic growth in R&D in geothermal that right now the policy landscape doesn't necessarily align to the technology readiness level of geothermal. And so moving federal funding just from R&D early stage to later stage commercialization could be helpful.
Awesome. Dan.
So one thing I'd like to mention, a lot of good policies within the Inflation Reduction Act on battery recycling, as well as in the bipartisan infrastructure law. An opportunity before us also lies in the growing e-waste problem. It's one of the fastest growing waste streams in the world. We have abysmal recycling rates when it comes to consumer electronics. This is something Redwood is working actively on each and every day. A large portion of our feedstock currently is consumer electronics, just because of the more frequent end of life, life cycle of them, obviously. But a couple statistics here. One I'd like to throw out. There's enough cobalt in 166 recycled iPhones to power a Tesla Model Y. There's an enormous opportunity for us here to, A, educate the public more about why it's important to recycle these devices, and B, build the components of the future from them. And something we're working on, but a lot more we can do federally to incentivize this and work together across industry as well.
Yeah, so a great emphasis on the circular economy.
For sure.
Others? Yeah, Chrissy.
Yeah.
We're getting there. You're all welcome to comments.
I would just say, Treasury and the IRS have done a phenomenal job of issuing proposed rules, notices of intent, guidance on how the implementation of the IRA. But what we need, and I'll be very specific, is additional guidance on 45X, the advanced manufacturing credit. We are making decisions now on future investments. The other one is the proposed rule for domestic content guidance. I think that is for the domestic content bonus. And then the third one, and I think that's very important, especially because it's not going to affect immediately, but we are relying on it, and we're relying on, and decisions are being made now on future investments, and that's on tech neutral. So any support that you all can give, any accelerated pressure you can put on Treasury. I know their plates are full, but those three areas of guidance are especially important as we're making investment decisions now.
Thank you. Did I see a hand down there? Was it?
Yeah, just real briefly, I would double down on what Dan suggested on circularity and circular economy. We take a roof off a house, let's just say, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and how much of that goes back in the landfill, how much of that can we reuse? So maybe that's the next frontier. Obviously, we're not going to solve that problem right here in the next 90 seconds, but think about thinking in the future that there's a variety of applications in the building environment where we need to be much better as it relates to circular economy and circular building products. I think we all, and our families and our kids and everybody will benefit from that.
Thank you for mentioning Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Yes, sir, Congressman. I know it well.
Anyone else? Derek?
Thank you, Representative Tonko, and for the question. My thoughts run to some practical considerations, and to some degree, maybe these fall in as housekeeping, but we're in that stage right now where a lot of these tax credits are in the hands of Treasury for implementation. And as they come out with their regs and their guidance, we really need for Treasury's work and regs around implementation of these tax credits to be kind of broad and all to embrace the potential of all of these emerging technologies that I think arguably were kind of the spirit and purpose, the congressional intent of Congress as it fashioned all of these incentives, right? It's a long way of saying, for example, clean hydrogen. We really need for there to be a broad definition around what constitutes clean hydrogen, because if it's narrow, it's going to leave a lot of things out. I was talking about our chemistry. Much of our chemistry process rests on Treasury decreeing a broad definition around what constitutes clean hydrogen. There's also, we were talking about, my company's focus is on sustainable aviation fuel. 45Z, 40B, those two taken together, the blender's tax credit, there's a 5-year life on that only. Many of the other tax credits have a 10-year life. In order to get an industry like this up and going, we really need a longer runway. So we need that to be taken out to more like 10 years in line with the other tax credits.
Which one is that again?
40B. And then, 45Q, which is carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. We need some parity there to ensure that sequestration and utilization are treated the same, because right now the numbers aren't quite the same. So, you know, this is just, again, it could be seen as housekeeping, but clarity, implementation, consistency, and really an investment in the future is what we really need as we get further up on our feet and go to scale and go to market. Thank you.
Okay, and we have Jim and then Mark, and I think have covered everyone.
Okay,
So-
I'll be very brief, because some of the points have already been made, but I think the implementation on the guidance is really critical across all of the key programs, the low-income program, energy communities, the workforce requirements, as well as the domestic content. So there's going to be a lot of work ahead over the next several months, and that's a huge priority for us and more broadly within the solar industry. And getting that right is going to be crucial. The only other thing I'll add, and I think this is a role that the coalition has played and can continue to play, is just having conversation about how all of the different pieces of the puzzle fit together. We have a lot of different industries represented on this panel. We're all playing a role in this transformation to a clean energy economy, and the transmission grid, as you noted, as well as the distribution grid, play an absolutely central role in making all of this happen. And so having that ongoing conversation and finding out where there are pinch points and what some of the solutions are going forward, I think would be really valuable.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we'll close with Mark.
Thank you. The heat pump market is served by thousands of contractors across the U.S., most of which are small businesses. The IRA gives them the opportunity to upskill their workforce, serve entirely new demographics, and grow their businesses. We need to capture their stories, and we need a panel of red state and blue state small businesses telling how this is revolutionizing their businesses and their communities, and build further momentum for this across both sides of the aisle. I think the opportunity is real, and I think that's a natural outgrowth if we can capture it and amplify it.
Terrific. Great statement to close us on. Look, on behalf of all of the SEEC colleagues, we couldn't have asked for a better panel. You've been terrific. And sharing how the IRA has now brought about all sorts of opportunity to your industry, to your companies, making certain that there's this huge foundation from which to grow. You've given great validation to the legislation with your boldness, and so we've got a great base upon which to build, and we look forward to continuing working with you. But thank you for allowing us to better understand the virtues, the assets that are real in the legislation, and good luck to all of you as you implement the legislation, and look forward to hearing all the great news that will follow. So let's go green, and let's go big, and let's go American.